So I would say the real set of emotions I was feeling was blanking out a little, then praying a little, then watching all the screens, and then doing this in loop. That's all I was doing. Every time there was a call off, right, it was something new. So it was not like at least we were repeating the same mistakes. No one was thinking of. So it was really like, oh, one more lesson learned today.
Civilizations become either spacefaring or extinct. This statement by the legendary astronomer Carl Sagan perfectly captures the aspirations and the trajectory of our species. We live in extraordinary times where we don't just have the ability to travel to space, but also to live there in places like the International Space Station. Hey everyone, welcome to a special edition of Crafting Bharat, powered by Innovations Venture Studio, in association with Speciale Invest, Byte Avenue and Fart Capital. A beverage partner is Tribe Kombucha. In this edition, we uncover the journeys of India's best deep tech entrepreneurs building the future of humankind. I'm your host Nithish. Now, the key challenge with accessing space is the ridiculously high cost associated with traveling to it. It simply just costs too much to buy a ride on a conventional space rocket, doesn't it? Well, say no more. Agnikul Cosmos is building small satellite launch vehicles capable of carrying payloads to space in an extremely cost-efficient and timely manner. Earlier this year, Agnikul also scripted history by successfully launching the technology demonstrator rocket with the world's first single-piece 3D printed rocket engine, also marking India's first ever semi-cryo flight. In this episode, we sit down with Srinath Ravichandran, the Wall Street trader turned rocket engineer building Agnikul Cosmos from India for the world. Hey Sri, welcome to the show.
Hi Nithish.
I want to take you to the 30th of May 2024. Agnikul just launched the Agnibaan sorted technology demonstrator mission with the world's first fully single-piece 3D printed rocket engine, and that also marks India's first semi-cryo flight. Walk us through what was going on in your mind when you achieved that milestone, and maybe if you can just start with the day before, that'll be a great place.
So I think the launch itself was supposed to be lasting for about 65-70 seconds, and then it has a trajectory where it just continues to fall back into the ocean. But that 2 minutes basically took 2.5 years of prep. So all I was really looking for here is it was like really waiting for the results of like a board examination or something that we wrote. And not just one person, like all of us have to pass the exam, right? Because even if one system fails, the mission itself is over. So I would say the real set of emotions I was feeling was blanking out a little, then praying a little, then watching all the screens, and then doing this in loop. That's all I was doing.
Was this during every attempt or the actual launch itself when it finally happened?
When the actual launch happened, because until to get to that point of actually seeing that vehicle lift off, I think not only just me, the entire team went through this toil of, will we somehow see this fly, right? And that is when we learned that, okay, it is one thing to build a rocket, but beyond building the rocket, the process of actually launching the rocket is like, it's like an event management process. So you need to get ISRO people to work with you. You need to get the team to work. You need to get the rocket to work, the supply chain for the rocket to work. And all of this have to just come together. And in that 6 hours, so our countdown actually lasts for 6 hours. And we very carefully chose midnight to be the starting point of the countdown. So basically we are up through the night waiting for the clock to just tick away. And through that entire process, something other is getting checked. You have a computer check happening, an engine check happening, something. So we're just waiting for all of that to happen, and then suddenly something says, not that great, and then we hold back and go back. We used to play these snakes and ladder games, right? It is that feeling. Have you noticed that snake that sits on 98 and it brings you back to 2?
Yeah.
That's how it feels like when you have a last minute call off, or any call off for that matter. Yeah. So beyond a certain point, it's like, okay, team also got used to what to expect even if that happens. So beyond a certain point, we started thinking, okay, this may happen, but we'll just figure it out. There is no other way out. You've come too far to even think about anything else. So that's what was going on in my head.
I'm very happy that retrospectively you're looking at it in that manner. But when we first got to know of Agnikul's launch, there was an immediate sense of excitement within the office. All of us moved our calendars for that whole day and the next day as well. And then we immediately hopped on a ride to Sriharikota.
And you did that 5 times?
Yeah. We hopped on a ride to Sriharikota and we probably arrived there by midnight or so. And throughout the whole night for the next 2-3 hours, it was about 12 a.m. when we got there. We saw a lot of guests just kept coming in. And almost everyone were just forming smaller groups between themselves, trying to talk about something. right? There was a sense of great excitement in the air, and everybody was also anxious about how this is going to go down, right? And maybe that's why we got into these group conversations to while away time until we could get into the mission control room. But then for you, it's even more harder, and you had to do this 4 times again and again and again. How do you manage your nerves? How do you calm down? How do you calm yourself down at times like these, when it's very, very crucial?
So actually, the countdown is 6 hours, right? And for me and even my other co-founder Moin and the people who are not a core part of the launch, actually there's enough work to be done. So we are not actually feeling that free time, right? So even though it always feels like, oh my God, I have to get through this next 6 hours and wait for that moment, somehow suddenly it's like T minus 2 hours. Somehow it's suddenly like T minus 30 minutes, right? And particularly in the last 1 hour or so, when you're building up to that moment, you also start having all the senior people come in from ISRO, your mentors start to come in. That's when the audience starts filling up the ISRO mission control room, right? So there are 2 mission control rooms for us. One is the Agnikul mission control room and one is the ISRO mission control room. All our controls we did from the Agnikul mission control room, but it was also parallel to the ISRO mission control room, which is where all the VIPs, the senior officials, everyone was sitting. So for me and Moin and for the senior team that was not part of the launch, it became about telling everyone. So after the first launch, people who came and we met them for the first time there after the previous launches, they were asking us questions about the previous launch. So it always felt like we were busy in those few hours. It never felt like we were whiling away time, or we didn't feel the need to while away time. Also multiple locations. So each location, and Sriharikota is this really huge island, right? Everything is casually like, oh, you just go make a right and go 10 kilometers. They don't say 10 meters, right? So between these places, just commuting takes like, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So we were doing that, going and checking on each of the, controls rooms and so on. Each place there is a Agnikul team and an ISRO team. So whenever you go there, they're also telling you something new. Hopefully good news, but something new. So I didn't really feel like time was passing, even though and there is also there are these small. I don't know if you heard of the tradition in US where they eat peanuts before every launch. I don't know if you heard of that.
I do not know this.
So this is like now every mission of NASA, big mission, actually the core set of people eat peanuts. So we ended up talking about what is the tradition for Agnikul now. We didn't come up with any. But all those things are also there within ISRO is what I heard.
Right.
It was an Agnikul launch, so we didn't see all of that come out.
Right.
But that was also happening. So this is basically the point I'm trying to make is it always feels like a lot of time has to go. But when actually the countdown starts, suddenly it's like, okay, suddenly it's like T minus 20 minutes. What are we going to do?
Right. But I think you mentioned the peanuts point, but a reflection of that is you never see the mission control floor very flinched about anything at all, right? Out of the 4 or 5 times that we've been there, even the ISRO senior gentleman, the chairman of ISRO and everybody else, right? Even if you had to put the hold for the countdown itself for the launch, even at the last minute, nobody looked like they were very scared or anxious about what was going to happen. And so was you, right? But the harder part for you was that you had your own investors on one floor, you had your own employees on the floor above, you had the chairman of ISRO and all of the other senior government gentlemen on the floor with you, and then 4 times you said, let's call it off. How do you manage expectations between all these stakeholders? I'm asking this because particularly you can sense that every time there is that much excitement and build up towards an event, all of us went there, we just put our hand on the head and say, how does this happen now, right? So how do you do that?
So I think the mission sort of demands it in a way, right? I mean, if we have to call it off, we have to call it off. Then comes the question of what do we tell people now that we have called it off? But I think, so the good part is, I think overall people were supportive, even though there were these bouts of frustration from everyone that why are you guys starting a countdown just to stop it? That feeling was there. But people did understand that there was so much hard work that was going into that moment, and there's so much build up that was going in there. So people were actually okay with it overall. And the good thing that was again happening for us is every time there was a call off, right? It was something new. So it was not like at least we were repeating the same mistakes. No one was thinking of, so it was really like, oh, one more lesson learned today. So the only question was how many more lessons are there to be learned. None of the mistakes that we did in the past or none of the things that happened without our expectation repeated. every time it was something slightly different or completely different. So that helped, right? Because people were also, the first set of problems were very operational in nature. Second set of problems were very much about the flight computer doing the right thing. Then finally it was about some ground system having some issue and so on. So in the end, it all seemed to be like, okay, there seems to be some reason or the real reason or the other coming up. But people are also starting to ask us questions about like, okay, at least will you maintain this track record? Will the same mistake not come again? And I'll tell you one more, trivia at that time. So when these call-ups used to happen, I used to go and follow what else is happening in the launches in the rest of the world. And luckily for us, in that same period, right, between April 7th and May 30th, SpaceX, which launches so often, had 7 call-offs.
Right.
So I always had that as a backup, right? SpaceX itself had 7 call-offs for their 200th launch or something. Just first launch, we are allowed to do a few call-offs. So that was also, I was prepping that way for it. But I think we overall had a general level of understanding. People were sympathetic to the fact that the team was going through a lot. So drilling was not that much. And in the end, particularly the last 2 call-offs were by the vehicle. The vehicle said, I won't fly. So that's all I can say. The vehicle said it won't fly, right? Because in every countdown process, there is a certain part where the humans are in the loop. And then there is a certain part where the vehicle decides whether it can go or not. So you basically at that point are like delegating the launch to the vehicle.
Is that the ALS?
That's the automated launch sequence, ALS, right?
You want to maybe explain very quickly what that is to our audience?
Yeah, sure. So every countdown has this last few minutes, which is called, the phase of that countdown, that part of the countdown is called automated launch sequence or ALS. So that there are so many checks happening in that very short amount of time that humans can't really come in and make any meaningful judgments. So you program all the things that can go wrong, all the debugging into the vehicle itself, into the flight computer itself, and give it to the vehicle and say, hey, it's over to you now. Right? And that is a key moment in the countdown, because at that point, you're basically like, it's a very dramatic moment in a way, right? It's at that point, you're like, okay, I am now switching off. After this, the vehicle is up to itself to do the work. So the last 2 call-offs were the vehicle saying, I'm not flying. So at that point, I was also like, okay, so maybe there is something really wrong. But all these were like small operational problems that were coming up. So big lessons for the future. Treat not just the rocket as a precious thing, but everything around it as precious. The plumbing, the electronics, everything that's on the ground. There is this usual bias that we have. It's only a ground system. No, it's not a rocket that's flying. It's a pipe on the on the ground that is filling fuel. A leak there is enough to call off the launch. So all those learnings were happening the hard way, in a very practical way there. But if the vehicle calls it off, you call it off.
Absolutely right. And I also happened to chat with Uma, the project director for the Agnikul sorted mission, while I was on a panel discussion with her. I just got 5 minutes with her and I asked, what were you feeling when the rocket finally lifted off and you were in that launchpad container room that you had set up? She was like, I didn't have any time to feel anything. I was just looking at the numbers. In fact, I barely even looked at the launch. I did not look at anything. I just looked at the screen for 1 second maybe, and I saw that there was fire coming out and then the rocket was somewhere high up over the launch pad. I'm like, go back to the screen, look at everything else, right? So do you also train all of these things with the people that are involved in some of the critical buckets during a launch itself, and how rigorous that is?
So actually what happens is, first of all, we put people in the mission control room who have already had the experience of running engine tests. Just engine tests. You're not flying anything. You're holding the engine on the ground and running it, right? Now, in those tests, very similar countdowns happen, very similar nervous moments happen. There is a similar automated launch sequence where you hand over everything to the vehicle, or in that case, the testing rig or whatever it is. So Uma has been through that a lot. A lot of people in the team have been through various sections of that. So we train for that by just doing more and more of testing. That's all. That is the one thing you can do. Then ISRO has its, we know ISRO is known for its rigor and discipline. ISRO has this amazing thing of what they call as a full dress rehearsal. And the joke that we were having is, hey, we do so much, we may as well just fly it that day. It is not a rehearsal. It's almost like a full-blown launch thing, right? So that ISRO does that. So that also gives you some comfort. And we do that 10 times in a row without a single mistake. Only then you're cleared for launch. So basically, it's called FDR, full dress rehearsal. Unless you get 10 FDRs right, back to back to back, there is no launch. You're not even authorized. So by that time you are there, it's the 11th time and you're already in this mode of I exactly know what is going to happen, which person in the mission control room is going to say what, everything you know about it. But I'll tell you the small things that come up even then. Everyone in the mission control room had a different way to narrate that first 5 seconds of liftoff. Literally, I heard there were like, I think 16 people in the room, 16 different versions of how was the first 5 seconds. Uma was saying that I didn't even know the rocket lifted off. There was one more guy like, I just was looking at the numbers and then I looked at the usual place where the camera is looking at the rocket and the rocket was not there. Right? There was one guy saying that. And there was one more person who was really like, I thought the feed froze or something. So people were all in the state of half excitement, half disbelief. So I think the training part comes from just doing it over and over and over. There's no shortcut. You just have to get used to it.
Right.
So so you get to that point, more and more with more and more flair as you do this more and more times. It's just, there is no shortcut at all from what I understand. It's just like, do it so many times that by the time you're actually doing it for the launch, it's almost boring.
Right. In fact, a senior ISRO gentleman who was with us when we were in the mission control area during the launch, we were saying, not this time. He was like, don't worry, it'll be like that for 3-4 times. And then every time they'll just find 4 guys and they can just launch it themselves. That's how these processes evolve over time. Very interesting. But now I'd like to travel all the way back to 2020 with you. This was the pre-pandemic era and space tech was maybe non-existent or was just beginning to take shape in the country. And there you were, fresh out of financial engineering, Columbia, having a Wall Street job, saying that I'm going to come and build a rocket company. How does one begin to make sense of any of this?
So I think the biggest thing you could blame for that is me never being happy with any job I had before that. But on a more serious note,
I don't know if that's sad or happy. But
so that's what you need to be at a certain level of restlessness to get to the next level, right? I think I should thank all my previous jobs to have kept me in that zone of never being fully happy with it. So I think, the thing is, I always grew up as a space enthusiast, probably because my mom was a physics teacher and too much physics happening in the dining table generally. Okay. So I think that's where it started. And I never really got too far away from it, even though I was making other choices. It was for reasons like, job safety. Somehow I should not become unemployable. These were thoughts that were running very early on. But when I went to Wall Street, when I went to New York, and when I actually started doing that, I had this one confidence that I had way too many degrees in way too many areas. Something I can do to get through life, right? So then the question is, okay, why not you give it 10-15 years of your life? See if you can build a rocket. Because honestly, as you rightly said, when we met Speciale or even when we started the company, SpaceX was already doing a lot of things. ISRO was doing a lot of things. But private sector in India was always about like, can you be a supplier to ISRO? Can you be a vendor to ISRO, right? You never had people being mission owners. It was India's mission. We all play our parts in getting that to work. So now when you come out and say, no, I will launch my own rocket. This is for my own mission. But ISRO will come and say, okay, this is good to launch. No one had very good clarity on what is going to happen. And we were sitting like this until 2020, COVID hit, and everyone was even more depressed and even more confused. And then we had the Atmanirbhar initiatives come out. And I don't know if you remember that moment where the finance minister was just speaking about sector after sector, what is going to happen. I remember sitting there and just watching it. Like it was like almost like a presentation kind of a thing. It was going on the TV live. And then suddenly out of the blue, a slide comes about space. And it's like, okay, what are they going to do? Are they going to call off everything? And then it was like, okay, we're going to enable private players to do things in space. So I think those moments were there. I remember Vishesh actually telling, if you do the right things for the right amount of time, probably the world will accept it at some point. That was the faith. We knew we were building new tech. We knew we were building rockets that no one was building. So there was some value to what we were doing. If the regulation is not allowing us to be a SpaceX, we'll at least be again a vendor to ISRO which supplies a full rocket. Or we can figure out something. Has been the constant mode of life. Right. I think all founders have that, right? Can figure out something. Yeah. I think that's what keeps us going, I guess.
Yeah. An interesting snippet I want to draw down on is you mentioned the geospatial policy that the finance minister was mentioning at that point in time, 2020. And that was such a new thing that people are suddenly excited about, what is this the government is talking about? Right. And maybe you won't remember this, but at that point in time, I had you on my podcast, along with Vishesh and a few other space entrepreneurs as well. Okay. I'm going to use 30 seconds of crafting Bharat time to talk about that part. But the reason I'm bringing you to that conversation is because I thought that's a good segue into a snippet that you mentioned, which is you said I had to speak to 300, 400 people of investors to get one investment, right? And that was Vishesh, and that basically changed everything. And Vishesh was also on that call when I asked this question. And then Vishesh was going, go ahead, Steve, tell them how many number of people you spoke to. It'll be an interesting trivia, right? So can you talk about the fundraising bit? Look, part one is saying, I'm going to put my life on the line and then say, I want to build a rocket company out of the country. Part two is assembling a team, which you've also done. Part three is who's going to fund the vision.
It happened the other way around. First was
maybe if you can just elaborate on that a little
so first putting whatever the bet that I was taking with myself in a way, right? It starts with me first, and then the co-founding team, then the others. And then when it comes beyond the founding team, money comes in before the team comes in, because you have to pay people something. How much time can you ride on this internship mode with students, even though you're a part of IIT Madras? I think there was a joke in US at that time when I was still there. I think they were saying you can't keep building rockets with only interns. Right. So I also was aware of that mode, and SpaceX got out of that very early. So they joke about that in that reference, right? Because there's so many people wanting to build rockets at that time, but it was all about a few slides and a couple of interns trying to do it. So that's how we also started. Nothing new there. So we had to make it real. We needed money. Otherwise, where can we get full-time people and so on? So yeah, fundraising has been a very interesting story. It actually connects me a lot with my own. I have this other passion for storytelling generally. I don't know if I'm good at it, but I like telling stories. And after a couple of pitches, I realized this is about storytelling. Right, and if you Google also, it'll tell you good story is what gets you funded. It's not a real product, and all these motivational lines are out there. So I started enjoying the process of telling people what can be done in space tech. But beyond a certain point, when they hear the whole thing and then they're like, sorry, this is not in our mandate, it pisses me off. It used to piss me off a little. But I also knew that there must be someone understanding this, because it was happening in the US, it was happening in Europe, and people are aware of all these things. So there must be someone out there who knows how to make this project go from a funding standpoint, right? So I think 450 people or so. I still have that Excel sheet, the tracker, the infamous tracker that all founders have when they fundraise. Yeah, there was a big list and kept talking. And I also realized it's a 3-part process. First, you go and tell what is a space industry. That's one meeting over. Next meeting only is about Agnikul and rockets. Then the third meeting is about differentiators and how you actually are different from the rockets, because we can't blame the investors also. No space tech deal was happening. So it was a lot of teaching, a lot of education happening in the forefront. So you have to get people warmed up to the fact that, okay, you can talk about rockets in a normal conversation. It's like, let us take the craziness aspect of it out and be like, okay, this is a product. You launch it, you get paid for it in a certain way, and that is a business. But to get people to that's 3 meetings. And anywhere in the process, you can be, told, okay, it's not in my mandate or whatever. There are always these 5-6 usual things that people say, right? And everything becomes like a bucket. Oh, it's that bucket. Okay, I got it. The too early bucket, too late bucket, not an India story bucket, India story, but not this deep tech bucket. So there are like only 5-6 reasons that come out. So I started getting used to it. So beyond the point, it was like, okay, what else is I going to hear? Became in a way enjoyable, I would say. But I think Moin always keeps asking me this question: how do you say the same story 100 times? As if you're telling it for the first time. So something keeps me, I think I like the part of telling that story. That must be the reason. I don't know otherwise how I can tell the same story over and over. Fascinating.
The joke about building a rocket company with just interns. There was this particular event called Startup Yarn at the IIT Madras Research Park, right? Around 2018, 2019. And that was the first time that I got to meet you.
Okay.
And I asked, hey, do you hire interns or do you work on these aspects? What are you working on the propulsion side of things? And maybe some question along those lines. And your first answer was, do you want to come work with us? And I was like, what is he saying? I was still a student. I was nowhere in that zone of, getting hired or I didn't think just the conversation would go that way. But then I just related to that part that you're mentioning. And the second point is you were also mentioning that, with investors, it takes at least minimum 3 stories for you to at least get to the product that you're building. And the first part is just about what space is, what it could be. But with Vishesh, it was nothing. You said it was just about your own background, what you've been doing. Can you maybe touch upon that a
Yeah,
little
I'll tell
bit?
you, I remember that like yesterday, literally,
Please
right?
go ahead.
Because it was the most different conversation in that phase. So I got to know about such an event that Chennai was conducting at IIT Madras Incubation Cell for startups, and we had to send a pitch deck, and interested investors will select you. So we got selected by two. One of them was Speciale. I leave the other one out of this conversation. So it was a 10-minute conversation, and I remember joking to Moin, "Hey, usually it takes me 3 hours, 180 minutes. What am I going to tell in 10 minutes? Okay, he's also going to say no or something, right?" I was joking. And then Moin and I went in. It was just Vishesh there in IIT Madras Incubation Cell, some room there. And I remember vividly not talking a word about space tech, rockets, nothing. It was like, what is your story? What is your story? Over. 10 minutes was done. Someone knocked the door saying, okay, your time is up. It's like, okay, we're back. And I was like, you see, this is a more interesting way to get a no. We didn't even talk about what we are building. Really,
And you still get a no.
right? Because he didn't talk about anything, right? And then, out of the blue, in 2 days later or something, Vishesh writes to me saying, can we have a longer meeting? It's like, oh, okay, something is moving here. And then, of course, then I got to know that he already had knowledge about this being a business and, what you can do to make money here, how you can be profitable. He had a good idea about that. But yeah, that was a very interesting 10-minute conversation, going and talking. And you know what? I researched on the Speciale website that time. What do they look for, right? When you go for a pitch, you do that. And they actually had written that we bet on founders, not on their products, right? Or something of that sort. I don't remember the exact phrase. So I was also remember telling Moin that, hey, really, he only bets on founders. He didn't hear anything about the product, which is really how it happened for that. But I think in the end, finally, it's the people who make it work. So I understand that now after 6-7 years of Agnikul. But at that time, it was a very strange set of pitches to start off.
But do you think the scenario has changed now with investors? Are they more open to hearing about ideas like these? Because you also mentioned in one of our earlier conversations that, hey, I raised my seed round and I thought I knew how to fundraise. Then I went to my Series A and I realized that I don't know anything. So I have to rework everything from scratch again.
Every round is its own fundraise. Like it's a new story. Expectations are different. So you're almost you're working out a new logic every time because the audience is changing.
Can you elaborate on the little bit and say what would it be for pre-seed? Let's say, for example, some student watching this wants to build a space tech company, right, or a rocket company. Can you maybe go through that part? Pre-seed, what would be the storyline? Like,
so I think it is really in the first few rounds, it's really about people. The product, because you may pivot, the business model can change and all these things can happen. So at that point, I think maybe as an investor, you'd get better answers. But I think what they were looking for are these people serious? Is this just a passing fad? Is this like, okay, this guy saw a SpaceX video and came for a pitch? Or does he know what he is trying to do? Whether he can do it is another question, but is there something he can do, right? And I heard that feedback from a couple of other investors as well in that phase. Then through the seed and I think maybe whatever pre-series A, a lot of, you're putting everything pre and post now, right? I think there is a seed round, pre-series A, series A, post-series A also may come, I don't know. But I think in those phases, people are looking for milestones. So something, I think, and that is actually one more important aspect when you're building hardware or any complex product. How do you break it down into milestones that you can measure and also convince others that it's a measurable milestone, right? Like I did a really good electronics test. Unfortunately, doesn't qualify in that. It really doesn't. But an engine test qualifies. Right, so that kind of calibration we were doing. So what could I put out there, which is still meaningful for the product's journey, but also as an outsider, when you look at it, it should be like, oh yeah, these guys have done something about it. So that breaking down of the journey into milestones that not only is meaningful for the product, but for the investor is what is going to get you to the next couple. And by the time this famous conversation about customers start. What are your customers thinking about? And it's important actually because otherwise, particularly in deep tech or space tech, in your example, you're asking me for a space tech entrepreneur, you get so carried away by the tech that you're building something that no one wants, right? So it's very important to go and get that reality check. And sometimes it's one of the hardest experiences because all your dreams will be like, oh, okay, but this is a great product, but no one will want to use it, right? So you need to keep that, particularly for deep tech, I'm saying. Otherwise, you'll end up building good tech which no one will want to use.
Did you think you got that balance right early on about
we were talking
having a
to
very
customers.
practical reality check vis-a-vis what you're building?
For me, it was mainly because I remember seeing the problem in Los Angeles when I was there, right? A guy came with a stroller that you take on a flight or something. He opened it and he took a small satellite out. It was like this big. You could easily lift it. And he just went on and on and on about not being able to find a rocket to launch. So I sort of knew that there was a real problem. But we were constantly talking to customers. So Moin, my other co-founder, right? So he is the person who talks to customers a lot, and we were always hearing only one thing. Even with all the rockets available, people were not happy about how they were taken to space. So they felt like there is an inefficiency, and we are only trying to drill into what is really the problem. Why are you unhappy? There's a rocket flying every other day. Why are you still unhappy? There are rockets that are getting cheaper. Why are you still unhappy? And the more we started thinking about it and tried to step into their shoes is when we started realizing what should be in our rockets that are not in today's rockets, otherwise flying rockets. So I think that helped, definitely. I don't know if we got it right at exactly the right pace, but there was these real harsh reality checks. You'll go and come like, this feature no one wants. Right?
Fascinating. Another interesting perspective that all of us at Speciale have had over the years, having funded deep tech companies over the last 8 years or so, is that progress precedes policy. And this is also something that you had mentioned very briefly earlier on in our conversation, is that just do the right things and you do it long enough, then people will see it and then do something about it. But at least my personal view is that this is a very retrospective learning, right? Because you've done it, you can go back in time and then see, oh, this is why we've done it, and therefore I can make a statement, or this is my learning. But for the founder, the risk matrix is very different, right? For an investor, it's hard, yes, but that's also one of the other 10 bets they're taking. So therefore, they can choose to underwrite that part to an extent, right? Depending on who you are and what you do. But for the founder, it's just, you just have to go all in. And when there is a checkpoint like that, that's outside of your control, irrespective of the hard work that you can put and the amount of sales or any amount of activity that you can do, at the end of the day, if somebody says you can't build private rockets and then launch, then what do, right? But that's a risk that you chose to take. Why?
No, I think you had the answer in what you were just saying, is because I generally believe in, and luckily Moin also believes in the same thing. If you can't control something, don't worry about it. Right? Anyway, it's going to happen outside of your control. And we always knew that something can be done. We never knew what that something was. As I told you before, something can be figured out was the hope that was pushing us. And we were very clear that we are building tech that did not exist in India. Like, that can't go west. I want to build rockets, want to do something that, probably SpaceX is doing in US. But if that is not possible, still our engines will be valuable in India. Still our 3D printing approach to building engines will be valuable. So that faith we always had. And then the question is, let someone say no, then we will see. At that time it was like no, yes, no. So we continue. Let someone actually come and say, this is not allowed. Right? That was what was there. And I'm a very firm believer, and if you can't control something, don't worry too much about it. It's just, it doesn't make logical sense. The fears are always there, but then that'll be there anyway. Right. That's just your mind wanting to be afraid of something.
But credit where it's due. I think the government has also done fantastic work with the InSpace, ISRO supporting our own initiatives and all of that. The moment that this whole wave started, people just saw it, that it was going to be a big thing, and then Can you maybe touch upon how some of these government agencies, programs, policies, people have helped you on your journey of building Agnikul so far?
Yeah, so the 2020 announcement about InSpace, I think that changed everything about how the world looks at Indian space tech, right? Because before that, India was already a world leader in space tech. We were in the top 5, top 3, depending upon which mission, top 3 to top 5, right? But we were there. So we are a spacefaring nation that has been established way back, and we continue to be that. So now the question is, when you allow policy to open up to allow private players to come in, suddenly the vendors you talk to as a startup or as a private player, the investors you talk to, the customers you talk to, everyone is like, wait, the government itself is doing something. So there must be something in the country happening, right? So they just give you that extra weightage or value. They take you more seriously. That's the number one thing. Number two thing, you don't need to answer this question with every fundraise. Right? Will the government allow you? Will the government allow you? No, the government will allow me. Now I can say that. So it actually takes off mind space that goes into worrying about this stuff. Right? So that is another big help, I would say. And the last part, which is the most important part, people come to get actually be employed here. Otherwise, it's like, okay, I mean, founders can take this risk, as you said, investors can also take some risk. Why would a guy or someone come and actually apply for a job here if they also have the same question hanging? Anyway, no one will allow Agnikul. If that is the mode, why will they come and apply, right? So I think that opened up. So you suddenly saw not only a flood of startups come up after the government opened it up, you saw more people applying. Just applications just started flooding. So I think, yeah, overall across the board it was fun.
And because you mentioned people, I'll segue into a different question I had for later. Is at the launch at Sriharikota and even maybe at your office, everybody that we got to interact with, right from the interns to that of people working higher up in the org chain, you can sense that there was a great sense of excitement around what they were building, and you tell them something, it gets done, right? There was always that sense of ownership as well that you had mentioned. But the interesting bit about that is most of your team does not come from very pedigreed backgrounds, right? They are from people from very humble tier 2, tier 3 cities, people from polytechnic, ITI institutions, where they've just dabbed with hardware that long so that they know how to do things, right? Maybe they don't know space tech, but they know hardware, right? Talk about your philosophy of how you've engineered your organization into training some of those people over the years to actually launching a rocket over time.
So I think the approach we took to building teams was always because, the moment you play with hardware, and I have done a little bit of this in my engineering days, you get a little pessimistic. It's just inevitable because it doesn't work easily, right? So the ability to take risks starts coming down because there is this bias within you that things won't work. So we solve for people who have hardware experience but not direct space tech experience, because they are then able to think freely about problems. If you talk to someone who's been in the industry for 15 years, it's very hard to find people who are still optimistic about building new things. Anyway, it won't work. That's the usual mode that comes out because they've seen it. It's not like they're pessimistic. They've seen so much, failures. It's like 100 failed tests for one successful test, right? There is this, again, going back to writing and narrating stories, there is this one line that this writer Aaron Sorkin says, I don't know if you heard of this, 100 bad pages for one good page of writing, right? That's exactly, we say this even till date in Agnikul, 100 bad days for one good day. Now the point is, if you've not experienced 100 bad days, it's easy to say that and get away with it. If you've actually experienced it, it's bad. So hire for people who have passion, who are sincere, who know they have a lot more to learn, but are genuinely understanding hardware. So that is the mix we always solve for. We augment that because we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. Just because we hire people who don't know to build rockets directly doesn't mean you have the time or the money to go rebuild, what is rocket science, right? That has already been done. So that's where getting retired ISRO people to help really, really, helps. What happens is when they start seeing these younger people, those ISRO scientists, the retired ones, they start recollecting their early days in ISRO. So there were these conversations, I remember. So our engine, the first engine we printed was about this big. And we actually didn't know how to package it properly. So we took it in our hand and came from the vendor. Literally, it was like a 100-kilometer journey. Someone had it in their lap and they brought it because they didn't know how to pack it. And we told this to someone thinking that they're going to be, really yelling at us for you didn't really look up packaging. And I got a story saying this is exactly what we did in ISRO as well for the first engine. Right? So I think that sort of connection suddenly makes people, think about, we are not on the wrong path. But it's very important to mix that knowledge of not reinventing the wheel with that freshness of we don't know what all can go wrong. Because if you know everything that can go wrong, every story is more pessimistic than optimistic. So that is what has worked for us. We try to always have hiring processes that solve for that. Sincerity, that ability to learn, that culture of, we know less and we don't know more, right? That should be there. That attitude should be there, and only then you can build a rocket. But I think that augmenting that with ISRO experience really, really helps.
Fascinating. And briefly before the Agnibaan started launch, we had the opportunity to go to the launch pad and then look at, how that was positioned and everything. And like you mentioned, Sriharikota is such a big island that everything is 10 kilometers away, right? From the mission control, which is the center point, you take a right and then you go to the launch pad along the shore, right? And I thought that was probably like some 1 kilometer away, 2 kilometers away, maybe 3 kilometers, right? It was 15 kilometers away or something. It was like a solid 30-minute journey that we were on the car. And the thing about Sriharikota is that it's very hot and humid. But if you take that journey along that route, right, you will very quickly find that there were also these compounded wires, broadband cables, data cables that trace that entire boundary across the shore to the launch pad itself, right? From then you're connecting that to the mission control to get your data. And then from there, there's another wire to Agnikul's mission control. It's not just about building a rocket, but it's also about building all of this infrastructure, and that you have to do it. So what all have you had to do, and the Agnikul team had to do like this to be able to realize whatever you've done so far?
Yeah,
I can only imagine how it is like working at.
So just to give
40
context,
degrees.
I think just to give context to everyone, right? I think so ISRO has its own launch pads and its mission control centers. We had our own launch pad and our mission control center, but we also had to sync our mission control center with ISRO's mission control center. Obviously, our mission control center had to be synced with our launch pad. So that's the wiring and everything you're talking about. To be honest, I think all of this got done to some level in Chennai once or twice when we were building our testing facilities, because we built our testing facilities. So we sort of knew how this was going to be. I'll tell you the more surprising things, which are probably more non-technical. How to get tea or coffee. Right?
Wow.
To solve for that was hard. It was not easy. You can't take, I'll tell you, right?
Yeah, the security.
Security is one. But beyond that, if it is going to take you 25 minutes of drive to go get tea, by the time you're back, you're already like, when is the next tea?
Yeah. When do I get lunch?
Right? So that is there. So then we had to come up with a process on how to go get tea. Right? That was a problem.
Wow.
And then even more sensitive topic, bathrooms.
Right.
Nothing was close. So, and it is really a question of, okay, daytime you can manage something, there's some building, some far away, you can go there. Nights, what do you do? Right? And we always, our countdown is midnight to 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. So you need to get used to doing things at that time of the night. And it was not easy to go buildings that are open. They usually close the doors in Sriharikota, even though it's a completely secure area, because there is wildlife there. Right, so we had to figure out which bathrooms should be open. We ended up building our own bathrooms with permission of ISRO. So I think those were things we never expected. In the story of building a rocket, I never thought these are milestones that I will, have to do. And then you go back and read SpaceX story or ISRO's early days, exactly the same.
Right.
So that is actually very, fulfilling in a way to read, because it really feels like you are like, oh, there is one small version of ISRO that we are trying to do in our own style.
Right.
But the same challenges they also faced. Where to go for water, where to go for food, where to go for, bathrooms. This was a problem, real problem. Engineering is at least okay because you got some sense of it in Chennai. I know these wires have to go from here to here. But there in Chennai, bathroom problem was taken care of.
Right.
So I think that was actually the more challenging part for me.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure no one wants to open the restroom at 2 a.m. and then find a cobra inside. There are
Luckily,
several boards there saying snakes beware. Right along that journey.
It's a jungle, right? You launch from a forest, you are going into their habitat.
Right.
So you'll have to respect. It's like, I think the snake must be thinking, I don't want someone to be opening the door and finding a human there. Exactly. So we are very clear, and Moin says this to the all team meetings. Remember, guys, we are going into their house. So give them the allowance and the space, and you try to navigate around that.
Give them privacy.
Yeah.
Let them do their job. You do your job.
Yeah.
Got it. What's the big dream, Shri?
Big dream is to really make space transportation like ground transportation, right? Let's make it as simple as booking a rocket ride on an app. I think that is really the goal, so that people can then start thinking about what to do from space. Today, if you want to go to space, anyone who understands the industry a little will be like, but first of all, how to get there, right? I think that should not even be a question. Just like if I have to come from Chennai to Bangalore, I'm not really thinking about how am I even able to go to Bangalore, right? There are buses, trains, flights, everything is available. So getting to Bangalore is not the hard part. What I do in Bangalore is the hard part from Chennai. Similarly, getting to space shouldn't be the hard part. So that is the big dream. Every step, every technology we are building, and cost reduction is just one way to do it, right? Once you bring the cost down, everyone will start looking at it. But what other things to solve for? Rapid access, making it really flexible for everyone, making it easily available from like that level of, tell me the mass you want to put in orbit, tell me the launch location, tell me the destination. This is the rocket for you, go launch it in 2 weeks. That is how easy it should be. And I think until we do that, I will not feel like we have done something meaningful to the system. Because rockets are flying. I mean, PSLV does a really good job. Falcon 9 is doing a really good job. So what is Agnikul going to do? If we can make it a little more of a commonplace thing, that I think is a big goal.
Fascinating perspective. I think we all just should be very grateful of the people that have strived so hard before us to set all of these up for us as a country, right? And two figments that come to mind as I also recollect whatever you're saying is at the launch of Chandrayaan 2, I think that was the first time ISRO had opened up the public gallery for people to come in and then watch those launches. And the first launch might have been at 2 a.m. in the night. I remember getting on a train all the way from Tanjavur to get to Sriharikota, and I went there. I saw young children. I saw people who were differently abled. I saw very old people sacrificing their sleep to come in and then look. And it was almost as if we were all in a cricket stadium, right? Cheering on. The noise is just so deafening, maybe even more so than the rocket engine that people would get to witness. And that got called off that night, right? And people still went happy. And again, a month later, it was rescheduled to an afternoon time.
Correct.
I again hopped on a train and went there. And then I saw close to 6,000 people showed up, right? On a hot afternoon in Sriharikota to watch the Chandrayaan 2 mission unfold, right? And I just felt so happy and grateful to just be in that setup and watch everything. I think the takeaway here is that the best thing about the current India or the new India is that they're not ignorant of all of these sacrifices that people like you, people like the senior gentlemen at ISRO are making to, build something for the country. And I think once that is there, then it just makes the journey of whatever you are building that much more rewarding, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that is one half of the story. The other half of the story, I'll just give credit to spacetech. It just has that magnetic pull, right? I mean, you don't need to be a space tech person to go and enjoy a rocket launch. It's just that excitement is out there. I think that it connects with something a little more more basic with our instincts, because I think we are all explorers at some level, right? And our day-to-day job, maybe that doesn't come out very obviously depending on the job you're doing, but you connect with that feeling of going to a place where you know very little about. And that's why I think anyone in space tech, there is this mode where even if you're not at all a space person or a space geek, at some point you have that explorer in you kicks in. Right. You know that you're going to a place where no one has been to, or very few people or very few things have been to. And that draws. That's why I think you were not a space tech person at that time. When you said you yourself came for the second launch. Like if the Chandrayaan team, it's a job, it's a duty. Why would you come, right? And I think like you, so many people came, and that's because that fascination for the unknown is always there. It kindles that spirit in us, I think. So probably that's why I think space tech is always going to be that. That slight unreachability aspect of it is what pulls you there.
Yeah. I think it's only going to get better from now. All right. Now we move on to some very quick takeaways for our audience. Take no more than 10 seconds to answer some of these questions, right? What would you change looking back on the past 7 years?
Better presentations for pitch decks.
What are you the most grateful for?
Grateful for, I think, things that aligned without me trying for it. Government policy opening up, investors opening up, professor at IIT Madras agreeing to support, things that I didn't expect but aligned.
I know you have an interesting answer for this, but pick an alternate career if not for space tech, and also elaborate. You can take more than 10 seconds for this.
Alternate career. So I just am, as I told you, very drawn to storytelling. So I even now, whatever little time I get, I try to read or listen to how people write screenplays. So screenwriting would have been the alternate. Yeah, I think so. I went to film school for a while, and I part-time. I never had the luxury to go full-time for that, nor had the guts to tell at home that I'm doing full-time film school. But that pull has always been there. So yeah, if not for, I think there may have been days in 2014, 2015 where I actually contemplated that should we really do space tech and rockets, or should I just go to write screen?
No, you did not.
No, I'm not kidding. It's really those moments were there.
Right. One non-negotiable quality you look for in your team members?
Being aware of the fact that they know less and there is much more to learn.
Something you wish you did more of?
I think be more clear in communicating what I want to the team.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Sri. It's been a pleasure. All the best for your future.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me.
That's it for this episode. We'll be back with more startup stories. A big thank you to the audience for tuning in. Do like, share, and subscribe to our channel and get the best seats in the house to understand how deep tech startups are shaping the future of our country. Until next time, I'm your host, Nithish. Crafting Bharat, a deep tech edition, is an initiative by NewsReach in association with VC Circle and produced by HT Smartcast.